What's up guys, Matt with BleepinJeep. You see that JL right there? The steering is horrible. What are we gonna do? So it seems like PSC knew about the crazy steering issues with the JL early on, and that's why they made this kit. So what is wrong with the steering with the JL? Well, I've heard it's gotten better recently, but mine is an early model. I don't know if they fixed it or not, but you have to pay attention a lot when you're steering when you're driving, because it's just all over the place. If you take your eyes off the road for 1 second, it might be 16 feet over in the other lane. Is this kit gonna fix it on the highway? I don't know, but we're gonna put it on and find out. Now this kit replaces everything, and when I mean everything, I mean everything. The steering gearbox, the steering pump, the pulley, the belt, the hoses, the bracketry, the cooler, the Pitman Arm. But while we're at it, we're gonna put hydraulic assist on this thing, and when we're done, it's gonna be able to turn whatever size tires I wanna put on this thing, no problem. In the rocks, off the rocks. I wanna see if it does better on the street as well. Let's get started. Alright guys, let me show you how this is done. First we're gonna pop the hood and disconnect the battery. Now remember, on the JL it has 2 batteries, so you have to separate these 2 and lay them out, otherwise you still have power. Next we're going to take this tool, this little clip tool, or you can use a screwdriver, and we're just going to pop these clips off and start to remove the grill. We'll need to take this whole thing off. You have to pull pretty hard on the bottom, and it's really hard if you have a winch in the way, which I do, because there's these little clips that have to be pulled out and the winch kind of gets in the way. Next we're going to remove these little braces or supports, and then just remove these 2 bolts right here. We're going to remove this little pipe right here as well, and just get that plastic intake part out of the way, and then remove the air box. Next, there's a little cold air intake piece that we're going to remove from the front there, and I'm going to remove the tire. You'll probably want to as well. And you don't have to remove the fenders, but you're definitely going to have to remove the inner fender liners. And I'm just going to take the fenders off because that'll allow me to get in here easier, and you as well, so you can see what's going on. Next we're going to remove this. This is the electric power steering pump. How does that work? I don't know. It's magic, but there's 2 bolts there, and then there's 1 bolt here, and we're just going to start removing everything. This is the line that comes from the power steering pump, so anywhere that's bolted down to the frame, we're going to take those bolts out. And there's another one right here that we're going to get that as well. And once you get all these lines disconnected, then we'll be able to pull this pump up and out. You might want to put a bucket down, because some fluid is going to drip out at this point once you start removing these lines. And then you'll be able to pull it up and out of there and get it out of the way. Now come across to the other side over here. And if you are going to be putting in a new gearbox, every kit's a little bit different. This kit comes with everything. So I've got a new gearbox, but I need to get to it. To do that, I need to remove this windshield wiper fluid bottle and the bracket, this black bracket right here. So start removing some of the bolts. There's one there, there's a couple here, and we don't need to remove it completely, just up out of the way enough to get to the gearbox and to get this black bracket out of there. Now we have access to that gearbox, the steering gearbox. Next I'm going to remove the lines. There's going to be some fluid coming out here, and I'm going to try and fish these lines out from underneath. It's pretty difficult, and this one you have to be a master fisher to get that sucker out of there. Woo! Alright, next we need to remove this guy. Actually, not remove it, just get it out of the way. It has something to do with the vacuum system, so just set that aside for now. And then make sure you know your belt routing. I recommend drawing a diagram or taking a picture. Actually, you can't take a picture because it's so complicated in there. But we're going to remove the belt now by pulling on the tensioner, releasing the tension, removing the belt, and now we need to pull all these bolts here to get the alternator off. This is a reverse mounted alternator and it sits in there backwards, which is kind of strange. These bolts are very, very long, and you can leave them on there. After I pulled them out, I realized I didn't need to do that completely because you can just slide it backwards. But either way, pull this out, and now somehow you need to finagle this new belt into there. But just for your reference and for mine in the future, because I'm going to have to change this eventually, it's a Continental 4060900. There it is. Now use your diagram that you did before and get that thing in there and situated in all the right ways and over all the pulleys. And then we're going to take this pulley, idler pulley, off, and we're going to replace that with the pump, the new pump. So there's a bracket that comes with your pump, and we're going to use Loctite, of course, on almost everything here. And we're going to put the new bracket on the new pump and tighten it down, and then put it into place. It can only go in there one way, and it's pretty simple. So just put that in place, tighten it down, of course using Loctite again, and now you're going to set up the belt over a flat pulley while somebody else pulls on the tensioner to let loose of the tension. And then you're good to go. The belts are on. Everything's awesome. Now we need to reinstall and tighten the alternator and this vacuum pump system. So make sure you tighten all the bolts and get everything put back together. And now come over here to the steering gearbox. We're going to take this off, and the first thing we need to do is remove that little bolt right there, which will take steering shaft loose. And go ahead and pull that bolt out and then pull the steering shaft off. It looks something like this. There we go. Now just set that aside, and then you're going to need to take loose the tie rod off the Pitman arm here. And it's pretty high up in there, so it's hard to get loose without a pickle fork. So what I'm going to do is drop the steering gearbox down, then I'll have better reach. So there's, I think, 4 bolts right here that need to come out, and one of these is going to be reused, and I have marked on it with a marker right there to let me know which one it is. It's that top right one. And now that it's dropped down a little bit, I can get a hammer on it and break that loose. Usually if you bang on the side like that long enough and hard enough, it'll pop loose like that. If not, grab you a pickle fork, and then as you can see, the gearbox will pull itself out. Now grab the new Pitman arm, and it can go on 4 different ways, so make sure that you have it just like the one that came off in that orientation. Also use Loctite and put the lock washer on and the big nut, and then you're going to put it in a vise and use the biggest wrench that you can find, because this requires a lot of torque, and I happen to put a pipe on there as well. Then you're going to line that back up. They've already put red marks on there for you, so you can't really get it wrong. And then we're going to put it back in, and you're going to have to hold that in place while you get a bolt started. It helps if you have a helper. If not, use your man skills. And in the directions here, 90 millimeter, 90 stock, and 100 millimeter. So there's different bolts lengths that come with the kit, and use the 1 stock bolt. Now put some Loctite on this. We're going to put the steering shaft back together onto the gearbox, and now it's time for the cooler. Now the cooler installs right in front, but the problem I have is that this winch is in the way, and you need to drill and install this. And I just don't want to remove all this stuff because it's very difficult. So I have an idea. I think if I remove all this winch line, I'll be able to get in there with a drill. And not quite, but here's another idea. A little drill bit, I cut it down, put it in a 90-degree angle grinder, and I'm going to use that to drill my hole. Next, we need to put our lines on to the cooler, and this is the orientation that they go in. Make sure to tighten them up snug. While I'm in here, I'm going to clean all the bugs off of everything. Make sure to clean that up good first. Now we're going to put this in, and the top two bolts we're just going to reuse, and the bottom I'll show you here in a second, but I'm going to use the Christmas tree fasteners for that. Now the braces, don't forget those, and right there on the bottom, those are the Christmas tree fasteners. You can get those at the hardware store or online, and that works. It's solid. So next, grab this little package. There's two fittings. You can't get them wrong. They're two different sizes, and these are going to go into the steering gearbox. Make sure to put some Loctite on the side that goes into the gearbox, and then we're going to fish the lines through. They come with clamps on them, which is nice because they're just going to clamp to the factory locations that the other ones did. Right there, and right there, and there's one more on the top left. There's another clamp. So you're just going to route that over to the pump. Now it's time to figure out what we're going to do here, and we're going to install these lines onto the reservoir. And I've figured out the angles that I needed, and I've marked the lines so that I'll know which way to install them. This one just comes over the top like that, and this one is just a drain in case you ever need to drain this. So it's pretty hard. You have to push really hard to get these on there, but once you are done, it'll look something like this. All the lines at all the right angles, and then we're going to drop this in and put it in place of where the old pump used to be, and PSC has got it down perfect. It fits right in and uses the factory bolts. And I put the bolts in here, but you probably want to put the lines on before you bolt it down. So fish this line through from the cooler to the reservoir, and if you need to change the angle, just turn this and it'll change the angle on the other side. And then this is the hardest one right there, is to tighten that side. So this side goes to the cooler, the other side goes to the pump, and then once you get those lines tightened, tighten everything down, and then this line goes to the top fill reservoir. So this is where you're going to fill your fluid from, your steering fluid, and then it bolts right there to a factory spot. And then put this little line in. It's like a click lock line, just pushes in there. Now we're going to take the other side of the cooler and we're going to route it through here and to the steering gearbox, and that goes on that fitting there. We're going to tighten the fittings, and if you're not installing the hydraulic ram, you're pretty much done. You just need to figure out where to put this. It's going to be right in here. Connect this hose, mount everything back, and of course you'll need to bleed the system, which we're going to do at the end of this video. But I am going to still mount the hydraulic assist, so let's get started on that. If you are doing the hydraulic ram, go ahead and grab all of the hardware that you have left, and you're going to build this contraption. So this is going to mount to the axle, your ram mounts to that, and then this piece is going to mount to your stock steering. I don't have stock steering, so this is where it's going to diverge slightly for me. I'm going to have to figure out how to mount this. Now you can do this any way that it works. You can flip this over, you can have it pushing the opposite direction. You just need to make sure that your lines are on the correct side. I'm going to try to make this work just like this. We'll see if it works or not. This is going to go on the axle. These two bolts go right where your CAD is, your central axle disconnect. So that is mounted in a permanent spot. What I need to figure out is where to mount this, because the steering that I have is not quite the same. It's aftermarket steering from SteerSmarts. As for the hoses, these are the only hoses we have left. They're marked passenger and driver here, and they're going to mount to the ram, and the other side is going to go to the steering gearbox. Now before I forget, we need to attach our drag link to our Pitman arm. That would be bad, huh? And the torque spec for that is 110 foot-pounds. And then I'll remove the steering stabilizer. We're not going to need that anymore. And we'll install this just like the PSC instructions. So that piece goes there, that plate. And this is what it would look like if you were going to install it as PSC suggests. It's not a bad option, but I feel like for heavy duty rock crawling, it hangs a little bit low. It's higher than the axle maybe, just slightly, but if you start smashing on things, I definitely wouldn't want to be smashing on that ram. So in my case, I'm going to try and figure out how to mount it onto this. Now this came with the kit from Steer Smarts to relocate the steering stabilizer, but it's going to make a great mount for the PSC hydraulic ram. I made a very slight modification there, so it'll be more like double shear. I don't really like using single shear. And a couple of spacers on that side, and boom bam bada bing, we've got it set up. Now we do need to make sure that everything clears, so I'm going to jack it up like it's flexed out in both directions and steer in both directions and make sure nothing is going to bind up or contact another piece of steering in there. Once I've got that figured out, I'm going to mount the lines on the ram, and the other end of the lines go to the steering gearbox. And that's the hardest part, is tightening those little guys up there. They're very tight up in there, so getting a wrench on them is pretty difficult, but that's the way it's going to look once it's mounted. And now we're done. We just need to bleed the system. Now I've heard a lot of complaints about how hard it is to bleed this system. One of the things I think is happening is the cooler is getting full of air. So I'm going to take this off, and that way when I fill the system with fluid, 715, Swepco 715 is what they recommend, but I'm going to fill that up and let all the air out of that line that I just released, and I think that's going to help. So you'll see the fluid finally, after a while, start bubbling out of there. You'll see the air bubbles coming out as well, and this is good. You want to get all the air out of the system, and it's going to take a while. It's not going to be quick and simple. It's going to take a little bit to bleed the air. So let me show you how this is done. First of all, fill it all the way to the top there with your power steering fluid. Put the other end of that line into an empty power steering fluid bottle, a clean one, because you'll be able to reuse this fluid. Now put everything back together here, because we're going to have to start the vehicle here in a second. So on these, the instructions didn't say what to do with these, so I'm just going to put dielectric grease in them. This is the electrical connections that I did have from factory to the pump, the electric pump. So I'm going to put dielectric grease in here and wrap electrical tape around them and then zip tie them up and out of the way somewhere. Then put the air box back in place, connect the battery back up, and then you need to get your JL taser. Now if you don't have a JL taser, you're going to have to get one for this modification. Now go through the instructions on the JL taser and find this, the EP steering, and turn that off and then reboot the JL taser. Once that happens, it's going to delete the electronic steering, and that way it won't throw codes and flash lights. Now we're going to start the vehicle. Count 1, 2, 3. Then shut it off, and then come back over here, and we're going to open it up, and you'll notice that the fluid has been sucked down, and we're going to refill. So just keep refilling to the top, put the cap back on, and then we're going to start the vehicle again. Count 1, 2, 3, shut it off, and then it's going to be gone again. We're going to repeat this over and over and over, again and again and again. You'll see air come out, and you're going to repeat that until it just won't go down anymore. Once it won't go down anymore, then we're going to start it up and turn the wheels back and forth, lock to lock. over and over again. That'll suck more fluid down. And then we're going to check it. We're going to fill it. We're going to do it again. We're going to check it. We're going to fill it. We're going to do it again. You just need to be patient and repeat this procedure over and over. You'll notice that this starts to fill up because it shoots back into there. You can reuse that. It'll get foamy. Don't worry about that. Just keep on filling, trying to get all the air out of the system. And at some point you're going to have to put the wheels and tires back on, take it out, and actually put the weight on the vehicle, turn it back and forth, and that will remove even more air from the system. So just keep doing that over and over and over. This is going to take a couple hours, so don't get impatient. Keep on filling. Keep on turning. Now take the vehicle out, do a little test drive around your neighborhood or whatever. Don't go too far. And refill. Now if your steering wheel is off slightly when you're going straight down the road, adjust your drag link accordingly. Otherwise your computer is going to go insane, and you want to get that dead on. Now you are ready to install this little guy. All it is an expansion tank that keeps the fluid from going everywhere, and it just uses the factory bolt hole right there. Next we can go out and test this sucker. So this is very interesting to me. Bone stock on the left, and where it sits now on the right. And this is the same highway. You'll see in just a second. There's a bridge coming up right there. So same highway, same speed, same conditions, and you'll see that on the left I have to adjust quite a bit, a lot of adjustment going on, whereas on the right it's more stable. I don't have to have so many inputs going on. And this is what I've been complaining about from the beginning with the JL, was that the steering was just too crazy. It just wanted to go all over, and you really had to pay attention 24/7 constantly. You couldn't take your eyes off the road because you just had to keep on doing inputs. It was like it was left, right, left, right, left, right, and you had to do that over and over to stay in the center of the lane. Now it's much, much better. Look at this. This is something I couldn't do before with the old steering. Letting go of the steering wheel, it would have gone off the road by now. So much smoother, so much more enjoyable to drive on the highway. I don't think it has anything to do with the RAM, of course, but I think it just has everything to do with the factory got the steering wrong, especially with that electronic pump. That electronic pump, maybe they've got it figured out by now, but in early 2018 when they built this JL, it was not figured out. And maybe it's just a computer issue. Maybe they can update it. But either way, I'm much happier to have an old, trusty, reliable system. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed that video, make sure to click one of these videos right here, because you're going to like that one just as much, if not more. Make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, share with your friends, all that good stuff. Find us on Instagram and Facebook, and we'll see you next time.